Welcome to Change It Up Radio here with Paula Shaw. I'm so happy you're here today because I have an amazing guest who has some fabulous information to share with you about ways we can protect ourselves and strengthen our immune systems during this COVID-19 pandemic that we're all living through. So glad you're all joining us. Welcome to today's episode of Change It Up Radio. As those of you who follow the show know, we are a show that is all about change. We either spotlight people who are change makers, who are trying to make the world a better place, or we bring you information to help make change smoother and more productive. I mean, let's face it, we all have our difficulties with the upheaval of change. Life, life is tricky because we get nice and cozy and comfortable in a certain groove, and then what do you know? Something comes along and boom, upheaval. It all changes. Well, that's why I created Change It Up Radio, because we need help during those times. We need information. Knowledge overcomes fear. Knowledge helps us cope. And I find that it's very, very important to be as knowledgeable as possible when we're dealing with change. And it's a funny thing about change too, because it's absolutely necessary in life, right? I mean, if we didn't have change, we'd all be bored to death or we wouldn't grow. So we got to have it. Kind of that old line, can't live with it, can't live without it. We got to have it, but it's not easy. It's not easy when your world turns upside down, when everything changes. So Change It Up Radio is dedicated to trying to make change smoother and more productive for all of you. Most of you know I'm Paula Shaw. I am not only the host of this show, I'm a life transitions coach. And my whole job is to help people deal with that upheaval of change. And if you want to know more about my work, you can get that information at paulashaw.com. I also suggest you check out changeitupradio.com, because if you go to our Listen In tab, you can hear past shows, and we have had some amazing people on this show. Truly, truly life-changing, wonderful guests. Oh, and speaking of that, before I forget, one of our past guests who was on just about a month ago, Erin Shaw, who is related to me, my daughter, wanted everyone to know that her book that we discussed on that show, Have Baggage, Will Travel, which is a wonderful, wonderful novel taken from real experiences that she had at one point in her life when everybody she knew was getting married and her boyfriend just broke up with her. So she went on the road. But anyway, that book, Have Baggage, Will Travel, is going on sale right now for $7.99 rather than the usual. I believe it's normally $14.99. And you can get it if you go to her website, erin-shaw.com. erin-shaw.com. So as I was saying, we have had some amazing people on this show. Olympians, we've had football players, we've had doctors, researchers. Last week, Michaela Gaston, who travels with the United Nations and the State Department as a cultural arts emissary, was an amazing guest. So please check out some of our past shows. And if you'd also like to get information about being a guest on this show or a sponsor of this show, you'll find all that information also on changeitupradio.com. And so let's talk a little bit about this change it up thing that happened to all of us. Like it or not, it all happened to all of us last March because something came along called COVID-19. And COVID-19 threw all of our lives into upheaval. I don't think there's any area of life that wasn't changed or touched, impacted somehow by what happened. That many people lost their jobs because their jobs ceased to exist. Some people started working from home. Many people started working from home, and that had its pluses and its minuses. The education system went through huge upheaval, suddenly having to teach children on computers through this very format we're working with today, Zoom. So change, um, change I'm trying to think of an analogy, but one is not coming. But it's that we all have a love-hate relationship with it, right? We know it's necessary, we know it's inevitable, but so often we don't like it. And I think one of the challenges in life is to find something or some practice, some tool, some ritual, something you do that helps you cope with change. Because change is something that we all need to learn to better accept and deal with. Because, like I said, we don't have any options. It's here to stay. Sometimes when change comes along, we're dragged kicking and screaming into it, right? Because just like with COVID-19, there was no option. Sometimes when a change like a death happens, no one likes grief. No one likes the pain that we go through when change comes, but we work with it. We can grow through it. We can make changes in ourselves that we've needed to make or that we desired to make, but we just didn't have enough motivation to really make. You know, um, and sometimes change is the most fabulous thing that can happen to us. A lot of times we're stuck in habits or addictions that are not working for us at all. And yet it's so much easier to stay in that familiar rut. And that's where we can get into trouble. And some of the changes that have happened, I think, since COVID, actually, for a lot of people have been great. So many people wanted to go to a 4-day work week or working from home. And now the opportunity is here. I mean, I don't think there's any area of life, education, science, medicine, um, working out, fitness. How many of us have had to change the way we work out because the gyms were closed or we didn't have access to what we used to have access to? There've been, I can't think of any area of life that hasn't been impacted. And in some ways, for the better. Another thing that's happened as a result of this change that was thrust upon us is we all had a lot more introspective time. We all had a lot more time to really look at life. We weren't running around like rats on the hamster wheel or hamsters on the hamster wheel, whatever's on the wheel. But instead of all that busyness, we've had some time to look inside, to look at what really is going on. And some of that has led to racial unrest in our country and protests. People who are saying, I'm tired of it being this way. I'm tired of the inequity. I'm tired of what's unfair. And so personally, I think these are important changes, good changes that needed to happen. And sometimes in relationships, this can happen too, right? Like if you're so busy and everybody's kind of in their own little world, you really don't have to look as closely at the quality of the relationship. Look at what do you have going with the people you're close to in your life? And what do you maybe need to change? One of the areas that's most definitely been impacted by the pandemic is health. And this is something I'm going to be talking about with Dr. Ken Redcross very shortly, because who ever heard of telemedicine really before this pandemic? I mean, maybe that was a seminar that some doctor was doing that you could watch online, but nobody was getting their well check online. Nobody was seeing their doctor online. But now, many people are. And only in certain circumstances are people actually seeing their doctors in person. And that sure isn't the way it used to be. I mean, there was no option most of my life except to go to the doctor's office. Doctors were not coming to you. They were not seeing you online. Health was done in a certain way, and it was practiced a certain way. And we were all very used to that. And that was the norm. Well, that norm has changed. And one of the things that I really love about what Dr. Redcross is going to be sharing with us very soon is he was almost a little ahead of the change because his concierge practice worked differently anyway. So it'll be very interesting and fun for you to hear how he conducts his practice, but also we really, excuse me, want to get into the importance of vitamin D in dealing with COVID-19. We're calling this show, Will Vitamin D Save Me from COVID-19? And that's going to be one of my most important questions to ask Dr. Redcross, because we really want to know what's the connection, what do we need to do, and how should we do it to keep ourselves safe. So please stay with me, because after this break, Dr. Ken Redcross will be giving us the answers to all those questions and much more. All right, we'll be right back. So my Facebook viewers who are used to the way this all works, you know that we're not really, oh, I'm having a little problem with my stopwatch here. There we go. We're not really going to break right now because that will all be done in the studio when I send this show into my sound engineer. Of course, most of you know that due to COVID-19, I can't go into the studio to record. So we do it all on Zoom, and then through the magic of technology, I send this to the studio and he puts it all together for me. So let's get ready for Dr. Redcross, because I think he is going to be a treat for you on so many levels. All right, here we go. Welcome back to Change It Up Radio, here with Paula Shaw. So glad to have you with me today, because I am about to interview somebody who's got some information you really want to hear. He is a delightful man, a doctor, an MD, and his name is Ken Redcross. And I've already teased him that he was obviously born for his job with a name like Redcross. But he is also the author of a book called Bond: The 4 Cornerstones of a Lasting and Caring Relationship with Your Doctor. And he's the founder of Red Cross Concierge, a personalized medical practice designed to enhance the patient-doctor relationship while providing convenient access to a full spectrum of healthcare services and holistic and wellness counseling. He earned his degree from Columbia Presbyterian Medical Center in New York, specializing in internal medicine. So without any further ado, Dr. Ken, please join us, because we've got an anxious audience here waiting to meet you.
Hello. Hi there, everybody. Good to meet all of you. And Paula, I am ecstatic to be on here with you today, changing up. And I hope today we're going to really change some lives together.
Me too. Me too. So without any further ado, let's talk a little bit first about this book you wrote. Yeah. I don't think too many people really think about bonding with their doctor. And yet, I think that's a fabulous idea. So tell us a little bit about that.
You know what, Paula, it's interesting, everyone. It was almost, I was almost a little prophetic when I wrote this. Look, I feel very blessed to be able to deliver care to patients. And I started to focus on what was really important to have that perfect bond, because I feel that a doctor should feel like a member of your family. And when I dug a little bit deeper, everyone, I found that there were 4 things that were so important: trust, respect, empathy, and communication. And I started to really hone into that and said, oh my gosh, that's a novel idea. What if every patient had that sort of relationship with their doctor and can focus on those four cornerstones to really make sure that we were getting what I like to call a patient nirvana or a patient
Mhm.
happiness.
Nice. I really love that. And I kind of harken back to the old days when everybody knew the town doctor, right? He came to your
Right.
home when you were sick. You probably offered him a cup of coffee or a cup of tea, and then he took care of you right there in your own home. You had a relationship.
Yeah.
But we haven't had that as a norm here in our culture in quite a long time. What made you decide that that was an important thing to revitalize?
I thought over time, especially, so guys, I've been in practice for almost 2 decades now. And I realized that I wasn't fulfilled either. And I don't think patients were because medicine started to change where there was a bigger focus on volume instead of value. And
Yeah.
I thought the value was actually a patient feeling like, I love this doctor. He is literally like a family member and loves and cares for me. And so I figured at that time that I kind of wanted to take it back. And so that's why even in my practice now, I'm totally mobile. So I still make house calls. I
Oh,
travel when patients need me. So I'm kind of a throwback, Paula.
oh, that's beautiful. So you're mobile. Do you not have an office? Is it totally you coming to them?
Yeah, I had the office for a while. It didn't make sense because patients really loved the fact that I would come into their home. I was lucky enough to get a few free meals out of it when I come, and so forth. So it's beautiful. As I like to say, when I'm making these house calls, everyone, it's like I'm getting into the soul of my patients. And that's what's
Yes.
most important for me.
And you know what I when thinking about right now, we've all kind of become more aware in recent years that medicine isn't just a treatment for the body, that our health condition is a holistic thing. It's impacted by our jobs, our relationships, our
Yeah.
food,
Yes.
our exercise, our lack thereof, our sleep or lack thereof. And and so it makes such sense that the relationship with the healthcare giver would also impact our health.
It really does, Paula. In fact, everyone, I love to kind of tout the fact that my whole goal is to not have to pull out my prescription pad. If I
Oh,
can
that's
do that, that's success for me. I mean, obviously, there's some things where I have to, but the point is, that's kind of the focal point where we're starting on because as we're dealing with the body, there's so much more than just the medical aspect, as you astutely pointed out. You're
mhm.
dealing with the person, and it's not just one problem, it's multifactorial issues going on that we need to dive into that I couldn't do in the old sort of way of practicing medicine.
Yes. And yet, with the pandemic, are you still going into people's homes and how do you do that?
Oh gosh, look, so everyone, if I could paint you a picture, I've never seen anything like this in 2 decades of practice back in March, where I'm going in to see family members who cannot breathe, who have this really high fever, but they refuse to go to the hospital because they know that when they go to the hospital, there's a chance to have increased exposure. But
Right.
not only that, Paula, there was also a worry that when you went there, your family wasn't going to be able to see you.
That's
And a
right.
lot of them decided they wanted to be home, even if that were the end. And so I was very fortunate in that I didn't lose any patients as far as through COVID, but I had several at home, and it was very difficult trying to manage them to the best of my ability. But the point is that things were very different then. And things, thank God, or at least, a little glimmer of hope is coming a bit.
Yes, yes. And I want to ask you a question because
Mhm.
I think there's a lot of concern now. I mean, everybody's wearing masks, most
True.
everybody, which I think is so important. And
Yeah,
just because it's doing a loving thing for each other.
there you go.
And I most definitely do not think it should have anything to do with politics
Not at
because
all.
this is about health. But some people believe that if you're wearing a mask and that you keep distances and do those sorts of things, you can pretty much be around anybody and not get sick, that it actually takes the spittle from somebody who has the virus to somehow come into contact with your nose or mouth in order to get it. Is that true?
There is a good portion of truth to that, but keep in mind, everyone, that as we go throughout our day, we're touching surfaces. sometimes the surfaces have. Even that's the same thing even with influenza before the coronavirus came.
Mhm.
Lots of times, even if you're doing what you're supposed to do, you still get exposure to someone, and even your loved one or someone close to you at work. So even though we're doing all the things that are important, such as distancing and making sure we're wearing masks, and of course, number one, washing hands,
Hands.
sometimes we still succumb to illness. And so that's why we need to look for some different novel things out there that can make a difference in all of our lives and our health.
And so let's touch on one of those things that you just
Sure.
mentioned for a second before we get into the vitamin D story.
Sure.
Um, so it's super important that we still keep sanitizing, washing
Yes.
our hands, and being on top of that.
Absolutely. In fact, it's funny. This is an old adage you always say when you're washing your hands, which is number one, you want to be able to sing happy birthday to me twice. That's how long you're really supposed to be washing your hands really well back, and especially the fingernails. They've done some studies, and a lot of people will wash their hands but forget about the fingernails. So
Yeah,
that's important.
really. Okay. So even though the rest of us are not going into surgery, we want to sing happy birthday twice while we're washing our hands.
Exactly.
And
Exactly.
not forget the fingernails. That's really good information. I didn't realize it had to be quite that long.
Yeah, yeah, and that's even good. That's even better for the kids because that's something that the kids can you can kind of have some fun around with the kids and make sure they're
Yes.
protecting themselves. They love doing it that way. And now you have to get an adult to try and do it as well. But the point is we're just putting that emphasis on really how important it is to wash our hands.
And do you need to get under the nails with a brush or just washing them off?
Put it this way, not to that degree. This particular study was literally just making sure you were washing the nails themselves. It's kind of hard to get underneath them, and
Yeah.
women lots of times with longer nails. But the point is, it's just focused on making sure that your nails are a part as well of transmission potentially.
Okay. Good to know. Good to know. Now, have you had to go to telemedicine or are you still going from house to house or do you do both?
It's funny you said that before because you're right. Once again, I was totally blessed. I didn't see this coming, of course. I was lucky in that for me, it was always about that close relationship anyway. So I really haven't had to change much. I mean, sometimes I'll talk to patients the way we all are today, everyone, but there's nothing that really beats that contact, not direct contact anymore, but
Mm.
that contact almost eye to eye. I'm
Right.
a big energy person, Paula. So I feel energy as to what's really going on and so forth. So those
Yes.
things are important as you can feel that from some patients.
Oh, I'm so delighted you said that because I'm a founding member of the Association of Comprehensive Energy Psychology.
Oh my
So
gosh, I
I'm
didn't
all
know that.
about the energy in my work as well. And I
I
think
love
that's
that.
so true. And I also believe that that good energy that you're creating with your patients helps them get well. Because we
Yeah,
all
yeah.
know when our vibration is higher, when we're feeling better, we are healthier and we're happier and everything can work better.
That's true. That's very, very true. And in fact, Paul, I try to make sure everyone out there and everyone out there watching now, I want you to feel empowered when it comes to your health. Think about it. When we have some of our clinical trials, you'll have 15, 10, 20% of people who get better on placebo.
Right?
So that's your power out there, everyone. That's your power to self heal. You just need someone to kind of help you. And as a physician, I hope to kind of boost up people as we try to self heal a bit together.
I think that is so wonderful. And, I was just talking with a client the other day who was going through such frustration that she can't get her physician to email her back or call
Yeah.
her back at this time. And she was feeling so upset, so down. I mean, I could see it was such a drain to her energy that
Yeah.
she couldn't get the response.
And that's unfortunately a story that I've heard so much. It's even funny that you said that. I had a patient right before we went on, everyone, that I was making a house call to. And once again, she had her own physician. She heard about me, but she needed to speak to someone. She
Mm.
needed to speak to someone to ask questions and for support and so forth. And so I've heard that exact story from so many people. And I get it. Look, it's a major challenge nowadays. And so we're all trying to get used to, as we were talking about, that new normal, and change isn't easy for any of us.
No, it definitely isn't. But we're going to be talking about some ways to make this all better in just a moment when we come back from this break. So stay with us, everybody, because we are going to be talking about the magic of vitamin D and what it can do for you. We will be right back. Okay, Dr. Ken, we're not really going anywhere, as you well know, and they know.
Absolutely.
So if you're ready, we'll
All
just
set.
come on back. All right. Welcome back to Change It Up Radio, here with Paula Shaw and my guest today, Dr. Ken Redcross, who has got some wonderful information for us in the battle with COVID-19. There's some new information about things that you can be doing and that you can be taking to strengthen yourself, keep the armor stronger, and help you should you come up against illness. So, Dr. Ken, let's talk a little bit about this whole vitamin D thing. First,
Yeah.
tell us a little bit about the research about the vitamin D levels.
All right, so look, everyone. So let's remember this. Vitamin D is so much bigger and better than bone health. That's what we used to think, Paula. Now we've understand that vitamin D is pretty darn important for our immune system as well, everyone. That's why we're talking about it with the coronavirus or COVID-19. Now, it's important to understand that vitamin D is not a treatment for the coronavirus. That's not what we're talking about. But we know that the coronavirus preys on us when our immune system is down. And we've seen that so many times with the disease states and so forth. So that's why it's important that I challenge everyone out there, and you too, Paula, to
Okay.
make sure that we check our vitamin D levels. It's that important. My level is 57. I checked it recently, actually it's 65. So I want everyone out there to get on my level, my vitamin D level between 40 and 60. That's kind of the sweet spot where a lot of the studies show there's a lot of benefit for us, Paula.
Okay, so let me ask you a question. Is vitamin D different than D3? Because I take D3, but
Yep.
you need both, or are they the same?
All right, so that's an awesome question. So what Paul is referring to, everyone, is that there's a vitamin D2 and there's a vitamin D3. D2 typically takes a prescription. And so if you come into my office or if I were visiting you and I got lab tests and your vitamin D were 19, what I would do is use vitamin D2 to boost you up.
Ah,
That's usually 5,000 units a week for 4 to 6 weeks. After that, vitamin D3 is the maintenance that we see over the counter that
yeah.
we take. And so that's why that's important to make sure. But once again, you don't know this unless you get your vitamin D levels checked to see kind of where you are.
So this is huge because I'm among the guilty, Dr. Ken. I take D3, but I have no idea what my level is.
Yeah.
So, okay, how do we solve that problem? How do we find out what our levels are?
Well, there's two ways, everyone. There's an old way where you just call your doctor up, say, I heard this Dr. Redcross on TV or on the radio, and he told me to check my vitamin D level, but we've already talked that that's difficult. One thing you could do, everyone, there's a website called thepowerofd.org. And the reason why I mentioned thepowerofd.org, you can order at-home test kits that'll
Oh,
be sent home to you. It's a finger stick. You send the results in, and the good thing is you send your test in, and when you get your results, you can go right back to thepowerofd.org, put your number in, and it'll calculate how much vitamin D you should be taking. And
oh,
so it's a lot of good information there. And once again, it's kind of concierge-y in a way. So that's why I love at least sharing that as an option for some.
absolutely. What's that website again?
So it's thepowerofd.org. And it has a lot of other good information about vitamin D. Look, we talked a little bit. Some of the studies show that if your vitamin D levels are optimal, it'll decrease your risk of upper respiratory infections. If your
Huh?
vitamin D is optimal, it can help those who have insulin resistance. So that's kind of for those who are pre-diabetic. So making sure you have that support. We know that it promotes important healthy lung function as well. And maybe even a little bit when it's really low with obesity as far as support. Because vitamin D, the receptor in vitamin D, it's almost regulated by like 2,000 genes in our body. So
Wow.
vitamin D is really incredibly important for us. And so that's why I say, get your levels checked and see where you are, especially with the flu season on its way.
So let me ask you a question. We've all heard that vitamin D comes from the sun.
Yeah.
Can we get enough D if we're out in sun every day, eh, with or without sunscreen? What should we do?
That's another wonderful question there, Paula, because look, you're in beautiful San Diego, which is heaven on earth,
It
pretty
is.
much in my eyes. It's so beautiful. But the point is that So you can get a little bit of sun. If you're outside for 20 to 30 minutes, they say you can get 10,000 international units. But look at what we're doing now, everyone. We're all watching a video inside. We're
Right.
not out in the sun the way we used to. And then kind of flip that to those who have more melanin in their skin, such as myself, or maybe Latinos who
Mm.
also have a lot more melanin, which blocks the sun's rays. So that's why up to 80% of African Americans are low in vitamin D, and about 70% of Hispanics also are low in vitamin D as well. So that
Really?
creates a different problem for those groups. And so that's why it's important, not just for minorities, but for all of us to understand how it's impacting us, how we realize that almost 1 billion people supposedly are low in vitamin D worldwide.
Whoa, 1
Yeah,
billion people.
yeah.
So I was not aware that having darker skin blocked the sun and the vitamin D.
It does. And that's another reason, Paula. So when we're talking about what that does, also keep in mind, everyone, vitamin D is not particularly plentiful in our diets. Vitamin, those other things, they have added or fortified vitamin D. I'm a fan of sardines, so I typically get a little bit of vitamin D from fatty fish livers, or fish, I should say, rather.
Mhm.
So you can get a little bit of that. But then when you're talking about, for instance, the African American or Latino population, there's the melanin. There's the fact that you're dealing with some of the challenges, disease states such as diabetes, high blood pressure, lung disease, obesity, all of which are all associated with low vitamin D levels as well. So it's like a quadruple whammy in a sense. And so that's why it's kind of important to understand the kind of public health emergency that we're all in. Even if you're not a minority, there's still an education piece to that, to say, gosh, how is that affecting me though? I
Mm.
had one patient who actually through a friend, that she's Caucasian, and she was taking her vitamin D, but her levels were 100.
Oh,
That we don't want to go that high.
oh,
So that
that's
gets
toxic,
back to
isn't it?
getting to your doctor, or the powerofd.org to get your test kit, whatever that is. But let's see where we are. Let's get on the level that I want us to get to, between 40 and 60.
And how often do you need to test it? How variable can it be?
Yeah, I talk to patients every 6 months. And every 6 months allows us to kind of, especially here in the Northeast, Paula, it allows us to kind of get ready for flu season. We get one at the beginning of the year, January, or maybe February, and then we're coming to the fall where
Mhm.
we're really inside here.
Yeah.
We don't get out as much. And we're further from the equator already as well, so we don't get as much sunlight. And so that's why I say usually twice a year is a nice way to kind of see where you are.
That's really huge. And let me ask you, Dr. Ken, have we seen elevated levels of COVID-19 in people, Black people, Hispanic people whose D is lower?
Yeah, unfortunately we have. Look, there was a study that mentioned that, 1 in 4 people who actually were diagnosed with COVID had levels that were suboptimal. There was an Indonesian study, it was a correlation study that showed that when your levels were less than 19, there was 100% mortality. When it was over 34, there was zero mortality. And so what you're finding is that even though African Americans are only 12 to 13% of the United States, they account for almost a quarter of the deaths from
Really?
COVID-19. So that's a big, big deal when you see the small representation. And why is it affecting us? Well, it's the things that we talked about, but then there's also some healthcare disparities as
Yeah.
far as the access to care, as far as living in homes with a lot of different people in there. So exposure is big, which is the reason why you're seeing more African American children and Latino children get sick or even die for the coronavirus. Thank God it hasn't been that many children. One child is too many, but what I mean, it's been maybe a little under 100 or so, Paula. But the point is, by definitely, it's been more minority based, and that's because exposure. Their families are not able to telework, and so they're in the front lines and coming back home. And so, those are some things we need to get through. But at least we're learning kind of the story of vitamin D and what that can mean
Yeah.
for us.
That vitamin D story is huge too. I had no idea. And I have to tell you, I'm a health nut. I read a lot about nutrition. I try to take care of my health in as natural a way as possible, but I somehow miss this information. And I'll bet a lot of people out there have. And that's why I was so looking forward to having you on the show today, because this is huge.
It
It's
is
really huge.
very
So I
important.
want to be real clear with everybody. You said it's not a treatment.
No.
But let's say somebody comes in contact with COVID and they actually get sick. Is it a good idea to up the D levels then, or is it too late?
Well, not only that, everyone, the whole purpose of today is that I wanted to make sure I got out there and I challenge each one of you to check your vitamin D now. I
Mm,
don't want you to have to wait until I want to make sure that we are kind of heading it off at the pass, that we're getting there early to realize, like, where are my D levels? Where can I really get the most support for my immune system? Because
yeah.
that's the magic of what vitamin D is helping us with versus directly treating COVID. It's about making sure that we have the immune support that's necessary to get through the coronavirus, to get through the flu season, and to get through even other upper respiratory infections.
So before we go to our break, I have one burning question here.
Mhm.
If your immune system is strong enough,
Yeah.
can you come in contact with the virus and not get sick?
Well, look, put it this way, you can get less sick, right? Instead of being in kind of a more of an opportunistic state. Look, this virus in particular, it preys on those who have some issues. Most of them have preconditions already. As I mentioned, the diabetes, the heart disease, lung disease. It's getting those who are already having some immune challenges. So yeah, it's something that it's always important to have as much as a robust immune system, which also means sleep and exercise is a big part of that
Mhm.
as well, everyone. And also just the spirituality, not necessarily religious, but just the spirituality to realize that your health matters. And how are you going to take care of your spirit as well? Because stress can also affect your immune system as well.
Oh, I love that. And you know what? When we come back from this break, let's start right there because I was just a couple of weeks ago talking about stress and its impact on the immune system.
Oh,
So
wow.
we will be right back with Dr. Ken Redcross. All right. I'm so excited. Are you ready to go again,
I'm
Ken?
ready to go.
Okay. So let me just start that. Here we go. Welcome back to Change It Up Radio, here with Paula Shaw and my guest today, Dr. Ken Redcross. If you missed the earlier part of this show, be sure you go back and listen to it because Dr. Ken has been sharing some fascinating information with us about the importance of vitamin D and your immune system. And more importantly, how critical it is to know what your vitamin D level is so that you can adjust it accordingly. And once again, let's start off this segment, Dr. Ken, by giving them, there's a website, everybody, where you can go and order an in-home test to check your vitamin D levels. And that website is, what was it again, Dr. Ken?
The website, everyone, is thepowerofd.org. And on that same website is also a wonderful calculator that'll allow you to get your levels, put them in, and find out how much vitamin D you should be taking.
Perfect. That's the thing too, because I do know at one point in my life, I had some blood work done and my D was at a toxic level. I didn't know that.
Yeah, see?
So you don't want to just take too much, but more dangerous, especially now because we all want strong immune systems. We don't want that D to be too low.
No, we do not.
And in our last segment too, there was oh, I know there was one other question I'm dying to ask you before we go into the stress. I think there's a lot of confusion among people I'm talking to as to how easy it is to get exposed or what would exposure look like when you're asymptomatic. Do you feel sick at all? Are you noticing any symptoms at all? Or can you be the picture of health and actually have the virus
Yeah,
and be
that's
contagious?
that's the scary part of this, everyone. Yeah, asymptomatic is exactly what that word implies. A meaning no symptoms. And so that's the challenge. That's why the mask is so important, everyone. I love what you said earlier, Paul. It doesn't matter what side of your aisle you're on, everyone. Just so you know, I'm right in the middle. So it's not about that. This is a public health issue. Just to make sure, and it's not about you. It's about your fellow man or woman. And so that's what I think is just the most true way to really love your thy neighbor is to make sure you protect thy neighbor as well, with the mask, because it's not about protecting you, it's about protecting those that you probably love, of course, your family.
Exactly. And so it really is important for people to have masks on because you could have the virus and be asymptomatic and not know.
Exactly.
So you could be passing that on to someone else if you're out there interacting people without a mask on. Is that correct?
That's right. You could be the vector and not know. You know, it's even important for me. I get tested every week, Paula, because of what I do and so forth.
Yes.
So I want to make sure that I'm not that vector. So of course, everywhere I go, I'm in it with a mask, no matter where. Grocery stores, all those places, as you know, you can't go into now
Right.
without.
I'm so delighted about that. Here in California, anyway, it's a requirement. And there are some places where there's even $100 fine for not wearing a mask. I think
Wow.
that's excellent
Yeah.
because if we could all be counted on to be conscious and caring about our fellow man, we wouldn't need that. But
No, you're right.
unfortunately, we can't all be counted on.
No, we
And
can't.
and I'm so glad that you did touch on the importance of the masks because let's face it, none of us like them. It's a pain,
Right.
right? It's a pain in the butt. It's hard to breathe. It's just a pain, but we do it for each other. And
Yeah.
I think that's important that we not forget that that sense of we're all in this together because hard times are hard.
Yeah.
And if we feel like we're in it with others, then we don't have that feeling of being alone and miserable and scared or whatever is going on with us. So I really do think that it's important that we keep in mind that we're facing this as a world community and we have to do everything we can to help each other in many, many ways. You know, I know my Rotary group has done food banks,
Hmm.
and I think that's
Absolutely.
what I was saying earlier. I think it's important that we're all conscious of why are the protest marches happening? Why are people, feeling the feelings they're feeling? It's time for us to look at each other and why we're all feeling what we're feeling and what can we do to help our fellow man right now.
Absolutely, because we're all going to look, we all want to do this together, Paula, because once again, doesn't matter what side of the aisle you're on, guys, we want to get back to normal. We both do. It does, so it doesn't matter. So let's do
Amen.
that and let's bring this curve down and get back to normal.
Yes, absolutely. So let's talk a little bit about stress because
Yeah.
one of the things I think is a catch 22. As you mentioned, we know stress lowers the immune system,
Yeah.
and this pandemic has caused people a lot of stress. So, what do we do?
Well, everyone, so this gets back to another sweet spot that I talk about in practice as well. And that's whatever it is that allows you to just be to yourself, whether that's meditation, whether that's prayer for some, whether that's for me, I like getting on my bike, I forget the world, that sort of thing. Whatever that is that's yours, it becomes increasingly important because I hate to tell you, but stress is probably not going anywhere. It's going to be how we manage it, how we process that. And if you don't process it well, it can lead to dis-ease or
Yes,
disease. And so
yes,
we want to make sure that we focus it and that we don't necessarily use it as a badge of honor, like, oh, I work a lot, I'm stressed, that's normal. No, it isn't. It
right.
isn't normal. And so let's figure out how we can acknowledge it and then we attack the stress and figure out what we're going to use as our tactic to attack it.
I really love what you're saying because it's kind of like one of these sayings that I love, life isn't about waiting for the storm to pass, it's about learning how to dance in the rain.
Hmm.
And that's what I hear you
Like that.
saying. I mean, stress is here to stay. It's
Yes.
part of life. And I love that you said, don't wear it as a badge of honor. It doesn't have to be this way, but we have to actively find what works for us.
Yeah.
I totally agree with you. For some people, exercise is a great way to de stress. For other people, meditation, prayer, talking with people,
Yeah.
laughter really is the best medicine, isn't
I
it?
agree.
It actually changes us chemically, energetically. There's so
Yeah.
much about it. But lately, even in my own life, I've really been working with the concept of acceptance
Mm.
because that's a tough one right now. We've got all this political stuff going on, and one side is not accepting the other, and the other side is not accepting them. And everybody is going through their fears and their frustrations. And, all I hear from people lately is, oh, life's so crazy. Oh, there's so much going on. And I think that somewhere in there, while we know that that's true, somewhere we have to find a place to accept it and go forward still at our highest vibration, at our best self, with our energy as strong as possible.
I
And
agree.
I don't think there's a one size fits all, right? Do you?
No, no, and there isn't. And that's why I said you're right. There's a few ways. Some people will find exercise beneficial. Some people will find meditation differently. But you're right. And that's the beauty of us as human beings. There's something that kind of floats each of our boats in a way that really gets us to that place.
Yes. Yes. And I really want to urge everybody, as Dr. Redcross just said, find that. You have to actively find it.
Yeah.
Just sitting around and whining and crying or screaming and kicking
Yeah.
is not a way of de-stressing.
No. No. Not in fact, it goes the other direction, guys. It's more stress. And we don't want that. But once again, carve out time just for you. Whether it's, your husband, your wife, your children, something that's just for you, because we
Mhm.
all need that, especially as we're dealing with the challenging times that we're in. You need to kind of do a little bit of self-love.
Oh, I couldn't agree more. And I have to tell you, one of the gifts for me of this pandemic has been giving myself permission not to be busy every single second.
Yeah.
When there was so many places to go and things to do and directions to run and people who need you, I was like busy from morning until night. And then suddenly we couldn't run in all those directions and go to all those places. And for me, at first, I got to tell you, Dr. Ken, it was an adjustment. I always had this pervasive guilt or feeling of dis-ease because I wasn't doing.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
then I came to a point with the help of a dear friend of realizing that's loving yourself, to be able to just sit,
Yeah.
to be able to be, and to take that gratitude walk and just breathe and feel the joy that I am healthy, that the flowers are still blooming. After the fires, the skies will be blue again. They're almost
Right.
blue today. But I think gratitude, acceptance, being, all these things you and I are talking about right now are probably just as important to our overall health as the vitamins we take,
Yeah.
the other things we do, right?
I agree with you. And that's the other important thing. I have some people who are always working hard and so forth, but I'm telling you, when you take that time for you and
Mhm.
just you can be even more productive than you were before, but you're doing it in a
That's a
healthy way of
brilliant
production.
point.
And that's
Brilliant
important.
point. I'm so glad you said that. And it's a perfect place to end, though our time's gone by so fast. I
Oh,
have a million more questions I'd love to ask
oh,
you, but you're going to have to come back because
I would love
you
to.
and I are definitely in sync with each other. And your kind of medicine and your kind of health is certainly mine as well. So I want to thank you with all my heart, Dr. Ken, for blessing our show today with all this great information. And I'm holding you to a promise to come back in the near future.
Well, you won't have to ask me twice, everyone. And don't forget, make sure everyone take the challenge, find out what your vitamin D level is. And by all means, feel free to reach out. Let me know what your levels are. See if you can beat my level.
Oh, I love that. And how can they reach? Give us one more time the Vitamin D website, and how do they reach out you or find out more about your work?
Sure, everyone. So powerofd.org is the uber important website that we get to learn more about D and get your testing done. As far as to say hello to me, I'm on all the platforms, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, everything. And it's Ken Redcross MD. And I really mean it. Say hello. Let me know if there's anything that I can answer and help support. I'd love to do this. Once again, I'm so blessed to do what I do, Paula. So
Ah, and we are blessed to have you. So thank you
thank
again,
you.
Dr. Ken. Thank you to my listeners. We will be on air in San Diego at 9 o'clock on Sunday evening on AM 1170 and 96.1 FM. We're on every major podcast platform, including the new one, Podopolo, that you really want to check out. It's a great app to listen to your podcast, to interact. There's gaming and incentives and all kinds of fun. So check us out also on Podopolo and iHeartRadio. So, all of you, take care, stay healthy, and we will see you next week. Bye-bye.